Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Event Industry News podcast. My name is James Dixon, and as always, I wish you a very good morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever or wherever you tune in and access today's podcast from. I don't know when this is going to be published, probably in the next few weeks. This is my first podcast recording of the year, and it seems odd to sort of say it now, knowing that somebody may listen to this in a few weeks' time, but Happy New Year to everybody. I've not been behind the microphone or in front of the laptop in this particular sort of setting for a few weeks now, since before Christmas. So a very happy new year, and you know, it's never too late to say I hope everybody had a lovely sort of little break over the festive period, and on with the first podcast of 2023. And I'm excited that the first podcast of the year is with two guests, because it always makes my job easier. There are people who are far more qualified than me to be able to do the sensible talking, and I just ask, you know, the odd question here and there over the next 30 minutes or so. My guests today are responsible for a new white paper titled How Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Could Radically Transform the Events Industry. It is a compact but jam-packed 14-page document that I've had the privilege of reading over the last couple of days or so ahead of today's recording. So let's get our guests on. They are from the Clusivity organization. We'll find out more about the organization as we progress in today's podcast. And they are the directors, Meera, Somji and Andrew Carney. Welcome, both of you, to the Event Industry News podcast.
Thank you, James, so much for having us on this morning, and Happy New Year.
Yes, thank you. Never too late to say it, I believe.
Never too late.
It's never too late. Before we dive into some of the content in this white paper that I mentioned in the introduction there, always important, I think, to get a little bit of context about professional backgrounds, especially when we're talking about documents that have been written of this sort of nature. Meera, let's begin with you first of all. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your professional background, and what led you to this moment in your life.
Absolutely. Well, this particular moment, we launched Clusivity actually exactly a year ago today. So we are celebrating our 1 year birthday.
Congratulations.
And we'll tell you more about it in a moment. But before Clusivity, I worked for an organization called Smart Expo that offered data and analytics to event organizers. And previous to that, I was actually a consultant to the industry with Plural Strategy Group. So I've always been sort of in and around the events industry, offering data, offering support to organizers to help them make more data-driven decisions. And I've been very fortunate to work in different chapters of my life with Andrew, who is the co-founder of Clusivity.
What a lovely link. It's like you've done this before. So Andrew, on that note, a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so very much like Meera, my background is also as a bit of a data nerd. So I started my career in strategy consulting with AMR International, and then as a founding member of Plural Strategy, which are both strategy consultancies that work not exclusively, but extensively with events organizers. And then also like Meera, I then co-founded Smart Expo, which is a data-driven price optimization tool for the events industry. And then, yeah, happy anniversary. 1 year ago today, Meera and I launched Clusivity.
Absolutely. Well, very apt that we're recording this today then. And I should for context point out this is the 19th of January. So, you know, there's the birthday. You can add it to your calendars, everybody, every year. So let's dive into this now. And once again, we'll just give the title again for people who you know may have forgotten it when I mentioned it in the introduction. How diversity, equity, and inclusion could radically transform the events industry. And something you mentioned there, both in your sort of professional overviews, was data. And I noticed that does play a key role, I think, in much of this white paper. You know, in the early stages, it says that data holds the power to move us away from gut feel or wishful thinking, which is something that historically the event industry had to rely on, didn't it, before we lived in an age where so much data was available. Let's look a little bit, first of all, at what prompted this, Meera. Why was the decision taken to actually go to the efforts that were involved to produce a document like this?
Yes, so the real purpose behind producing this white paper was to refresh and update a piece of data analysis Andrew and I ran in 2020. It was the summer when George Floyd had been murdered, and many Black professionals in the industry were openly and bravely sharing their experiences of racism on LinkedIn and with their colleagues. And at that point, Andrew and I felt strongly that we had the opportunity and also the responsibility of participating in this conversation with the skills that we had of data analysis. So we ran the numbers on just how racially diverse the industry was. And we produced a paper, we ran an event with leaders from Informa, from Reed, from Clarion, talking about how they plan to drive change within their organizations. The feedback to that research and that event was actually the origin story of Clusivity. We felt so humbled and excited about the opportunity to help the industry improve, become more inclusive, that we set the gears in motion to launch what is a data and analytics platform to help organizations measure and take a more data-driven approach to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I've taken you back a couple of years, James, but really this was a follow-up to research that we had done 2 years ago.
And I suppose one of the data questions that I'd like to ask, obviously so much of the data that we capture in the events industry, Andrew, is very much related to, sales data in trade shows, visitor data, visitor numbers, visitor demographics, etc., etc., etc. How much data actually is there? Even though we know there is a lot of data in the events industry, do we have enough relevant data relevant to the particular topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion?
It was interesting. I think it was one of the things we looked into, as Meera said, when we started this work first in 2020, and then when we refreshed it this year, we looked into other studies out there that can help answer this question for us about how racially diverse and also what's the level of gender diversity in the events industry. And basically, we didn't find a lot of information. So we said, we've got our background analysing lots of data. Why don't we go out ourselves and take an opportunity to take a look at what some of the statistics are, and then shine a light on some of these stories. And I think one of the things that we feel is really important is bringing together both data, but then some real life stories. And that's what we've tried to do in the white paper. We tried to bring the data to shine a light on some of the issues, but then also tell some stories to say, okay, this is what this looks like in the real world. These are some of the experiences people are having, and this is some of the opportunities that we've seen from organizations that have taken a forward-thinking approach to this.
And it's what I'm deliberately not going to do today is, even though I've got a copy of the white paper in front of me with my notes on there, I'm not going to work chronologically, because I think it's important that after this, people actually go away and download this, get access to it, and actually read it chronologically themselves, because it does tell a story. It is very well thought out in terms of its layout, and I've read a lot of these types of paper. And something you mentioned there is key to it, is that it's not just full of statistics and pie charts and graphs. A lot of it is made up of these quotes from senior leaders, from people within the industry. And the reason I say I'm not going to work chronologically, because one of the things I noticed towards the latter part of the paper is a quote, as audiences across all shows get younger and more diverse, it's really important for us as organisers to continue to drive change through innovation to stay relevant. And as soon as I read that sentence, I thought that was really key, because what we are as organisers should be reflecting what our audiences want. And as our audiences, regardless of the type of event we're running, be it a gig, a trade show, a conference, if our audiences are diverse, we need people running those events to understand the audiences, don't we?
I completely agree. And I'm so glad you've pinpointed that quote from Michael Adenia, who is now the Chief Operating Officer of the UK Black Business Show. It provides this tremendous case study of the opportunity for event professionals, if they reflected, as you say, reflected the populations they were serving and developed new products develop new events. The UK Black Business Show only launched in 2017. And in the 2022 edition, they had 10,000 attendees. These are growing audiences that are hungry for innovative, fresh content and events. And those who can tap into that are are going to benefit. That's why the title of this white paper really is about radically transforming the industry. It's not just about how diverse from a gender and race point we are, but actually what we're missing out on if we don't take the opportunity to drive change through innovation.
Well, one thing I did want to ask today as a sort of a straight out question is there's again, I'll reference a sentence that's in the report. Likewise, data on the demographics of the events industry is the only way to assess whether we're making progress. And I was, I suppose, curious to ask, who defines progress? You know, where is the sort of the textbook that says this is what progress is? How do we actually define what that is, Andrew?
Yeah, I think we believe passionately in data as a way of showing that, because I think it's quite easy to, as we said at the start of the show, rely on gut feel and the feeling that, you know, we're doing some good things to try and make change. But the only way you can really define whether that change is really hitting home and that is by looking at the data and saying, okay, are we making progress on making our events more diverse? Are we seeing our leadership teams become more diverse? Are we seeing the industry as a whole benefit from the opportunities that diversity provides? And I think obviously there is no perfect yardstick, but what we're trying to do with this white paper that we've obviously now refreshed from 2020, and we hope to continue to do so in the future, is to provide a kind of roadmap for where the industry's come from, where it's going, and what it could look like if it takes advantage of these opportunities.
James, can I jump in then on your question about measuring progress? Because it's quite, it's a big question. And I think one way Andrew and I think about this is demographic data is almost your output. It is what the organization looks like as a result of its practices and policies and culture. And so for us, it's an indicator of progress, because if you are seeing more senior women leaders, more senior women leaders from other underrepresented groups, it means you're doing something right on the inside. It means your culture is inclusive. It means people feel a strong sense of belonging. It means people feel safe to report when they don't have a good experience, and they know that that will be taken seriously, and that will be and they will be, you know, safe in that culture to do so. It means they can progress. It means they feel their work is valued. And so that's sort of how we go about understanding progress.
And I guess anybody who's ever dealt with data, and if we work in the events industry, the reality is that all of us have dealt with data at some level at some point in the last few years, is that I suppose until we build up enough of it, and if we're only just now using the data that's available to start looking at this particular subject from a data point of view, until you've built up historical data to be able to see, you know, when change happened. It was a bit of a loaded question, so forgive me, but progress ultimately will only be seen, won't we, over a period of time where you have enough historical data to be able to look at, you know, when significant changes happened and when not as many changes happened.
Precisely. And I think that's why Andrew and I felt so encouraged by the trend in women leaders in the industry since 2020. You know, it's still very small. The absolute numbers are low. It's only 4 women in the top job across the top 20 organisers. But that's double what we saw in 2020. And when we spoke to Anne Lafair and Neil Gomez at Easy Fairs, we learned about, you know, what a positive impact that has made across the organization. And so there are really encouraging and positive stories to be learned when we do look at trends in data over time.
Please, Andrew, Son.
Yeah, I was going to say, just to add to that, I think one of the other things in the absence of historical data that we thought can be quite powerful is to look at benchmarks and compare how we're doing against benchmarks. And I think one of the data points we shone a light on in the report is that there are currently no minoritized ethnic CEOs among the top 20 exhibition organizers. And if you compare that, for example, to the Fortune 500 largest companies in America, actually there were 66 CEOs now, which is up significantly in the last few years. So we're kind of shining a light that, okay, we don't have historical data, but we know compared to other industries that there are some challenges here that clearly need to be addressed.
No, indeed. Again, another point that I wanted to touch on. There's so much I could have pulled out of the report today, and in a 30-minute podcast, we are, I suppose, in some respects, going to do the highlights, everybody, so that you can go off and read this yourselves in your own time. But there is an important question that gets asked a lot about, and it's addressed in the report, about how business leaders and senior people can increase the number of new joiners from minoritized ethnic groups. But that actually leads in the report into what I get the feeling you're pointing out as an even sort of more important question to ask is, how can we retain the people that we've already got and encourage them to stay? And that's the first thing that should be addressed before looking at how we bring new people from those groups on board.
I think that's completely right. Andrew, do you want to expand on that point?
I think it's a common reaction when you look at diversity statistics to say, okay, we're short on the number of women we should have in our organization, or we're short on the number of minoritized ethnic people. So the reaction to that is, let's go out and hire some people, and that will improve our diversity statistics. But we've through this research, but then also running our software with various events companies and companies in other industries, what we've seen is that doesn't make a difference if you don't have the right culture in place. And often there are points in your organization where your minoritized groups get to a certain level within the organization, but then they don't make it to the top of the organization because there aren't the right processes, there's not the right culture in place to help them progress through the organization. So I think where we encourage companies to start is by looking at the culture of the organization, at the kind of progression opportunities for your minoritized staff. How do we retain and promote people before you then start looking at your recruitment processes, which is kind of a backwards way to how many people think about this, but we've seen that's the most powerful.
Yeah. Go on, Meera. It looked like you wanted to jump in there.
I just feel so strongly about this. And I think any of your listeners, James, that are from any underrepresented group, be that women, be that from a minoritized ethnic background, be that from a lower socioeconomic background with a disability or LGBTQ, these listeners will know that if the culture doesn't feel inclusive to them, and if they don't feel like they can progress, they will look elsewhere, and they will look to see if they have options in other organizations that are demonstrating their commitment to inclusion more. And so it's a key area that organizations actually have under their control.
Yeah.
There are really, not easy, but there are really sort of doable, reasonable actions that organizations can take to build more inclusive cultures. And so it's something I care a huge amount about. And it's worth noting that, again, if we're looking at sort of trends in data, 2 years ago, there were 2 leaders among the senior leadership teams across the top 20 from a minoritized ethnic background. This year, when we ran the data, both of those individuals had left their organizations, one to a completely different industry and the other to another organization in the events industry. And as much as that is a small sample size, It tells a really powerful story about are we doing the right things to retain? Because otherwise you're just losing the talent that you're investing in and that you've already got.
Just playing devil's advocate here, do we know why they left? And is there an argument that both of those senior people were trained and developed so well in those organizations that they were offered better positions in the places that they went to?
I'd say that's probably that might be the case. So we don't know why they left, and it's a great point to raise, because organizations should be tracking why their people are leaving.
Absolutely,
If
yeah.
they're not capturing that data, they're missing out on something very important. Now, if you've invested and they've been offered a better position somewhere else, you know, maybe there's something else you needed to do to keep them, and you needed to sort of change the role and give them what they were asking for. But if they were leaving through negative experiences, it's on you to find that out and then to act on it if it's the case.
Absolutely. And this I guess raises, from an employment point of view, something that companies are still not very good at, which is speaking to employees when they are leaving, doing, you know, what used to be called an exit interview or something like that, you know, and actually that bit of data, I suppose, in some respects is as important as all the other data that we're collecting. Is if people are leaving organizations, why are they doing that? Why do they feel they have to do that? And I suppose that's easier said than done, because one of the difficulties is that people who are leaving may not feel comfortable being completely honest about it, which I get. But again, that's a cultural thing, isn't it? That's something that over time, if we promote that culture, then hopefully we can get you know, those sort of assessments as people are leaving organizations.
And one of the things we've really found is that by working with third parties, you actually get employees to open up about these issues. As you say, there's that nervousness about being completely honest. Is it going to affect my future career opportunities? It's a small industry. Everyone knows everyone. One of the things that we've really built in when developing our software tool has been looking anonymously, capturing data anonymously from individuals. And one of the fascinating things we found is that people, when asked anonymously, really open up. And we've had people through our surveys writing reams of text about their experiences and the challenges that they've faced. That is really powerful for organizations, because it's information that they had no idea of before. But we give them an opportunity to express that.
Well, that's the key word, isn't it? Opportunity in anything. You
Yeah.
know, if you don't give people the opportunity to do something, then how can you expect any sort of change outcome, you know, a new way of thinking? You know, there has to be opportunity in every level, doesn't there, Meera?
Precisely. And I mean, you're talking about sort of that exit interview stage. If you give people an opportunity before they get to that point of wanting to leave, if you give them the opportunity to share their concerns, and you've built a psychologically safe place to work where they can share that, you can prevent it. Our metrics in the platform, we do see as predicting attrition. In a way, if you've got low scores in certain areas, that will eventually drive those groups to leave. And so we do see it as a way of preventing losing talent in a data-driven way.
Well, one thing, going back, you know, to the report and referencing something that I just underlined, and again, it's a really short sentence that is one of those sentences that people could almost, you know, cast over, because it comes right at the end of a passage of text. Don't stigmatize people based on schedule. And I underline that for a couple of reasons. You know, we live in a diverse society where people have different religious beliefs, who may, you know, require time out of their daily schedule to undertake those religious beliefs. We've got single working mothers who may have to do a school drop off and a pick up in the evening. And one thing that I feel happened during the pandemic is that a lot of businesses who were maybe reluctant to adopt those more sort of flexible approaches, because we conduct our business 9 to 5, suddenly realized that the working from home scenario gave them so many more sort of different ways of thinking. Do you think that for this particular subject of DEI, that working from home situation generated by the pandemic has ultimately led to what could be quite a positive outcome as far as schedules are concerned.
Yeah, I think one of the great people we spoke to as part of this was Anne Lafair, who recently got promoted to co-CEO of Easy Fares, and she really highlighted this, that during the pandemic, the flexible ways of working actually gave opportunities to women in particular that were previously constrained by exactly what you said, school drop-offs, childcare, etc., to have more time to potentially find new flexible ways of working. And she cited it as something that she's seen at Easy Fares that potentially gave her a chance as well to potentially make it to that co-CEO role. So I think that was really interesting.
Yeah, I just personally, I saw so many people who suddenly were able to work from home, who suddenly adopted totally different working practices. And it's something we've spoken about in the podcast before. You know, everybody is unique. Some people work better in the morning. Some people are night owls and they thrash through emails between 8 o'clock and 10 o'clock at night. And allowing people to work when they are most effective at working is probably going to help businesses in any industry, not just ours.
I completely agree, James. And I think having that attitude and approach is the right one. This isn't about making special, adjustments for certain people. It's just allowing everybody to be themselves and flourish in the way that they can and they do. And I'm glad you picked up on the word stigma and stigmatize, because it points to the difference between a company saying we support flexible work and a company actually following through and meaning that they support flexible work. It's not enough to have it in writing if when a working mother or a working father needs to leave, there is sort of silence or eyes rolling or just side comments that are saying, are you sure that's a good idea, or you're going to miss out on so-and-so's meeting later. That's not good enough. It needs to be supported. The norms in the office need to be truly supportive and inclusive.
Yeah, and I think I can certainly remember examples of working in businesses, going back 15, 16 years and in my early 20s, where I could recognize what I suppose people would call an old school culture,
Yes.
of people being frowned upon for wanting to walk out the door bang on 5 o'clock because their childcare is going to finish, and it's almost like, oh, she's out the door every day at her contracted time. And it was even back then, I could recognize that that wasn't fair on that person, that the sort of the looks or the undercurrent of conversation that was taking place in the office. It really isn't. I mean, we talk a lot about the word, the fair, opportunity, equitable, all of these words are going to crop up. And I think one of the most important things is that I don't know anybody who can't honestly say that they've not witnessed that type of behavior at some point in their working life.
Yeah, completely agree. And I think the other thing with childcare is I'm a recent dad, and I know, for example, Meera the last couple of weeks has been super supportive of some childcare issues that I've had in it. And again, that's given my wife's actually traveling with work at the moment, so it's given her the opportunity to go off and have a really important work meeting. So that flexibility makes a massive difference.
It's an episode of congratulations today. We've got a first birthday, we've got new babies. This is great.
It's true. I personally think Andrew's daughter gives great contributions in our work, so it's only been positive from my point of view.
No, absolutely. One thing that sort of sprung to mind, having read through this yesterday and again this morning before we recorded this, is that is this the first of many? Having produced and gone to the effort of producing this particular document here, it strikes me that as an organization, because this is what you do, that this needs to become something that's fairly regular and being put out into the industry. Is there a plan to do this annually, biannually? What are the sort of the plans, first of all, for this particular, and what the hopes for this particular document, and then going forward?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. We really want to celebrate the progress that we're making as an industry, and that means refreshing this on an annual basis, and really highlighting the success stories, highlighting, shining a light on where we still need to make change. But the events industry is big. You know, it's not just made up of exhibition organizers. There are plenty of other types of organizations and segments of the market that I know are interested in this type of data because they've contacted me on the back of this paper. And so the plan is definitely to produce more white papers like this on different segments in the market also. You know, we've added actions at the end of the white paper, as you will have seen. And those are the ones that the evidence shows makes a really big difference. Flexible work, that sort of thing. But each organization has its own unique dynamics, issues, people. So we'd really encourage people to kind of use these white papers as an opportunity to reflect internally on how they compare. So yes, the more the better, in short.
Absolutely. And Andrew, just one thing to ask you, if I may, is from a data point of view, you know, are you hoping that people will read this, but also then get in touch with you? Because I guess the more organizations, employers of all sorts of sizes that you've got communicating with you as an organization and giving you the data or giving you information about how they're approaching this particular subject, that's ultimately going to help everything. So presumably there's an encouragement there for anybody listening to this to get in touch with you as an organization if they want to share what their practices are.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we've already had a couple of organizations that we're working with actually right now, Diversified Communications, who are in the UK and the US, and then Encore, who are working with us across 9 European countries. We're basically helping them generate a score for how they're performing on diversity, equity and inclusion by running a survey with their employees to identify what some of the challenges employees are facing, either with progressing through the organization, with the culture of the organization, and then we also look at overall how's the representation versus benchmarks. And I think benchmarks are important. So the more data we are able to gather about the industry, the more of a story we're able to tell about how your organization is performing compared with other organizations and where your specific challenges lie. So yes, definitely we very much appreciate that.
Fantastic. We've been talking on the podcast today to Meera, Somji and Andrew Carney from Clusivity about this fantastic white paper that they've published, how diversity, equity and inclusion could radically transform the events industry. And as I've said a couple of times during the podcast today, what we've done is scan over some of the sort of the bits of information that jumped out at me, but I've no doubt that anybody reading this, the way that it's put together, everyone will take their own sort of highlights away from it. I think it's that type of document that what I've highlighted is not necessarily what other people will sort of strike through with their pen or look at on their iPad as they're reading it. So I suppose the important thing to ask, Meera, is how do people get hold of it? How do they get in touch with you guys? And how do they read this report?
Great question. Head to the website. We are at clusivity.io. There will be a link there to download the white paper. And there's also a link there to book a chat with me. I would love to speak to any of your listeners about their DEI challenges, goals, plans, ideas. So there's a link, really easy link there to book a call and also to download the report.
And any social media handles, LinkedIn groups? Where are we on that side of things at the moment?
Oh yeah, we're big on LinkedIn. So give us a follow, the Clusivity page. We publish pretty interesting pieces about new data that's emerging on inclusion more generally. And we have also launched a newsletter today for our birthday. So if you register for that, you will get in your inbox highlights of our content, as well as a link to our Clusivity crossword for those of you who love solving problems as much as we do.
Oh, a bit of a puzzle and a crossword. I've not done a crossword in ages. It tends to be like a holiday thing now. Do you know what I mean? Where you sit down relaxing on holiday and you end up doing a crossword and 10 hours of Sudoku. And then
well, Yeah, I want to bring that into your life, James. I want a little bit of crosswording every day, a little bit of holiday feel every day.
Fantastic. Maybe there needs to be I'll mention that to the powers that be at Event Industry News. Maybe there needs to be a monthly Event Industry News crossword. Maybe that's something that old school, a digital crossword. My thanks to both of our guests today. And before we wrap up, just a reminder that if you are listening to this via your favorite podcast platform, don't forget that you can head over to the eventindustrynews.com website. There are video versions of all of our podcasts, so please do go over and give those a watch if you've got time. And whilst you're on the website, of course, there are the latest news, features, special supplements on the Event Industry News website, as well as the A to Z supplier directory. If you are an event organizer, a professional working in the industry, and you're looking for a particular product or service, the A to Z supplier directory on eventindustrynews.com is no doubt the place to go. Of course, if you've gone to the website first of all today in order to watch this podcast, a reminder that you can go in the opposite direction. All of our podcasts are available to listen to wherever you get your podcasts from, which brings us neatly and nicely to the end of today's episode. And the final thing that I should say today, which we've already said, but I'm going to repeat it anyway, is a very happy birthday to Clusivity, the organisation that both of my guests are from today. Meera and Andrew, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Good luck with the report, and best of success for the future. And I hope to speak to you again on the podcast further down the line when the next report comes out, and let's see where we are and see what progress is being made. Thank you to you both.
Thank you ever so much, James.
Thanks, James.
Well. No problem at all. And we'll see you all on the next edition of the Event Industry News podcast. Goodbye, everybody.